Why did the battle mage's girlfriend break up with him? He always put his staff before her. What's up, people? We are back at it again with another 1-bar build. This week we are going to play around with a stamina sorcerer using a two-handed weapon and Oakensoul. This general concept can be applied to any class with differing amounts of success. So potentially I'll go through all of the classes in future videos and apply this general concept with tweaks for the skills across the different classes. But today we're going over what I will refer to as a battle mage, a sorcerer with a big ass maul. A quick note, this style of build would work best for solo content. So think overworld content, arenas, public dungeons, that sort of thing. You can certainly do 4-player dungeons as well, and you'll be able to complete most content inside the game with this sort of a setup, whether you're playing alone or running dailies with a group. I would say that the lightning staff heavy attack setup is more geared towards kind of trial and group content, while this would be more geared towards solo content. But don't take that to mean that you aren't allowed to try doing certain content with a character like this, because you know, I'm not your dad and I'm not the ESO police. Alright, so first of all, we want to ideally play as an orc, an imperial, a red guard, maybe a nord. You could use a dark elf like I'm doing here, or a Khajiit would work well too. With the worst options probably being Breton and Argonian. But that doesn't mean those races won't work, because it doesn't really matter that much, and you can essentially do what you want. But as always, it's good to know what the best options are so you can make an informed decision if you're making a new character. We're going to place all of our attribute points into stamina, and we're going to take the thief as our Mundus stone. The lover would technically work here too for more penetration, but critical will be more important to us, so we'll go the thief route. Our food will ideally be takeaway broth or smoked bear haunch. But if you're lacking the funds for these higher tier foods, you can always get away with using bewitched sugar skulls as the tri-stat food, or the crown food if you're just running super easy content. The tried restoration potions will work just fine for this build, so don't worry about going out and buying or creating anything super expensive. Our two gear sets are going to be the good old Sergeant's Mail along with the crafted Order's Wrath. Sergeant's Mail is a heavy armor set looted in the Wayrest Sewers and Wayrest Sewers 2 dungeons. This set gives us some max health and health recovery, a damage buff, and gives us stacks of Sergeant's Focus when we complete heavy attacks that continuously buff up our heavy attack damage up to 5 stacks. So we'll be slotting Sergeant as a chest piece so we can take advantage of using heavy armor on our biggest piece. A two-hander, in this case a maul for the extra penetration, along with either a poison or a flame glyph, and then as a ring and a necklace, both in bloodthirsty with weapon damage glyphs. Our mythic Oakensoul will also be in the same style with the same glyph. Our other set, Order's Wrath, is meant to maximize our critical chance while giving us another small buff to our weapon damage. This one can be crafted in the high isle zone in any weight, but we'll want to use medium here. We'll be equipping Order's Wrath on our shoulders, arms, legs, belt, and feet. We'll want all of our armor pieces to be divines with max stamina glyphs. And then we're also going to be wearing a light Slimecraw's guise as a helmet with the same trait and glyph, and using light for this piece allows us to take advantage of the Undaunted Metal passive, giving us a little stat boost. Noble Duelist would be an okay set to swap out in place of Sergeant's Mail if you'd prefer. You can loot this set from the Blessed Crucible dungeon, but it's a light set, so keep that in mind. This one gives us a damage buff, adds to our stamina recovery, and when we do light or heavy attacks, we get a buff to them that's basically stays active all the time. This would work well for a more hands-off approach, though you'll be missing out a little bit on the buff that Sergeant's Mail provides, and you'll miss out on some armor as well, but if the trade-off sounds worth it to you, I wouldn't look past this set. Another set worth looking into for this setup would be the craftable Gold Coast set Kvatch Gladiator. This one gives us critical chance, a damage buff, and also gives us a big boost to our damage when we're attacking targets that are under 25% health. Grave Inevitability is another set that could work here. This one can be looted from the Graven Deep dungeon from the Lost Depths DLC, and it gives us some critical chance, some weapon damage, and when we deal damage with light or heavy attacks, we stack up Remorseless, which at 5 stacks gives us Major Force, which increases our critical damage by 20%, and also grants us with an aura that gives our allies Minor Force. And one final set that works very well in the context of solo builds is Hexo's Ward. This one can be looted from the Deadlands Overland, or purchased from a guild trader. It grants some critical chance and weapon damage, while also granting us a damage shield when we deal critical damage. At the end of the day, many different setups could be used here, and you should experiment with different sets to reflect your own personal playstyle. The 2 sets offered up in the build that I'm equipping on my character are easy enough to loot and work well enough to act as a general canvas upon which you can build. Other sets not mentioned here will work as well, so don't be afraid to try something new or something that sounds fun to you, especially things from the 2 new dungeons that just came out. In the champion points section, we'll slot whatever we want in green. I like mount speed personally, so I tend to use Warmount, Gifted Rider, Steed's Blessing, and Rationer. I tend to keep this same setup on all of my builds, aside from my main character that does the bulk of the deconstruction and looting. In the blue section, we'll want to slot Deadly Aim, Fighting Finesse, Master at Arms, and Reaving Blows. You might think that Weapons Expert would be here since it buffs up our heavy attacks and we're using a heavy attack build, but I find the best outcomes with the skills above. If you don't need Reaving Blows for the extra heals, feel free to put Weapons Expert or something else here. And in the red section, we're going to slot Boundless Vitality, Strategic Reserve, Bloody Renewal, and Celerity. If you don't care about movement speed, you can swap Celerity out with Bastion to increase your damage shield's effectiveness by 15%, as well as the damage you do against enemies with damage shields. You could also consider Rejuvenation here as well for a little buff to your recovery stats. Either way, it's up to you, and I personally prefer being able to move a little bit faster and find the trade-off to be worth it. For passive skills, we want to get all of the armor passives since we're using all 3 weights. We'll also want to get Unholy Knowledge and Persistence from the Dark Magic skill line, everything from Storm Calling and Power Stone from Daedric Summoning. Be sure to get your Undaunted passives, Racial passives, anything from Alliance War and Craft that you like to use, and then everything from Two-Handed. One of the reasons this build works is due to the passives in the Two-Handed skill line. In pretty much the same way that a Lightning Staff heavy attack build damages enemies standing near the one being attacked with splash damage, so too does the Two-Handed skill line offer the same sort of thing. We're also given a damage buff to a direct damage attack after completing a fully charged heavy attack, along with getting a big buff to our stamina recovery after we kill an enemy, so be sure to unlock everything in the skill line for the weapon we'll be using. Moving on to our skill bar, we're going to firstly include Hurricane from the Storm Calling skill line. This is a very simple skill that turns us into a lightning boy that deals damage over time, that ramps up and grows in size over time. It also gives us minor endurance when we're in this form, which we basically will be at all times when running content. So if for any reason you hate Hurricane, you could swap it out for something else like Bound Armaments or Crystal Weapon, but Hurricane is very simple and effective. It's kind of a set it and forget it skill. We're also going to slot Stampede from the Two-Handed skill line. This works as a mobility tool to launch us at an enemy from a distance, while also dealing a guaranteed critical upon landing, while also applying a damage over time effect on the ground where we land. Another option that would achieve a similar result would be Streak, which you'll want to unlock to slot in occasionally anyways if you're running solo content like Vatesharan Hollows. Our third skill will be Carve. We use this skill to sweep our weapon and damage multiple enemies in front of us, and it can be stacked on bigger enemies up to 3 times, causing the bleed damage over time to extend to a possible 32-second maximum, which is great for tougher enemies. Using this skill also grants us a damage shield, which is a nice added bonus that adds on to our ability to survive. In order for us to apply Major Breach, we'll be using Razor Caltrops as our next skill since it's the only option we really have to achieve that goal. This throws out a nice big circle of razors that both slow and damage enemies as well as debuffing them with Major Breach. The only other sensible way to get Breach with this setup would be from using the Night Mother's Gaze set, but this requires dealing critical damage specifically on one target at a time, so keep that in mind if you opt for Night Mother. Since I mentioned a sensible way, I would also add on Crushing Weapon from the Sigil Order skill line as a nonsensical alternative if you specifically like that skill and think it's cool or something like that. This one causes your next light attack to deal extra damage and apply major breach, but Caltrops is infinitely better here in my estimation. Our last skill is going to be Critical Surge from Stormcalling. This will last for 33 seconds and cause our critical attacks to heal us, which pairs nicely with the Reaving Blows champion ability, if you decided to use it. I like to use this for its simplicity and its long active time, but you could alternatively use either Resolving Vigor for a heal over time that you can simply reapply to yourself when you get low, or you could use the Naked Bird Lady, Twilight Matriarch, if you don't mind having pets around, and use her as a spammable heal that also deals some damage. I decided on Critical Surge because it basically allows us to consistently heal as we deal damage from Hurricane and Caltrops along with our physical damage, and also to make this a certifiable non-pet build. But again, if you don't mind having a pet, Matriarch would work well here too, and the passives from Daedric Summoning will give you some health and some big boosts to recovery stats. Our ultimate is somewhat of a flex spot. I like to use Power Overload here, but you would do fine with Meteor or Storm Atronach, or if you really want to get into the Battle Mage zone, you could use Flawless Dawnbreaker. Pretty much anything would work here, but I like the way Power Overload just lets you use heavy attacks and become a Sith Lord and melt away anything that you even look at. The rotation will be pretty straightforward here. Always be sure that Hurricane and Critical Surge are active. You can Stampede directly into your foes, or you can use your Caltrops from a distance before jumping in, kind of depending on how much of a berserker you're feeling like in the moment. You want to carve any groups of trash mobs to get your damage shield, while being sure to take advantage of the ability to stack this 3 times on tougher enemies, or to melt down packs of trash mobs, and then put the beat down on everyone with heavy attacks while you wait for your timers to run down. As long as you're actively dealing damage with Hurricane, the Sundering effect from Stampede, the bleed damage from Carve, the damage over time from your Caltrops, and the damage from your heavies and your ultimate, you'll be consistently healing at all times, and you'll have a damage shield that can be reprocced just by using Carve on an enemy. So as long as you have Critical Surge up, and especially if you pair it with Reaving Blows, you'll be very, very survivable for solo content. The main idea here is to keep moving and keep the damage going out so you can ensure that the heals will always be coming back in. Here's some random footage I recorded earlier playing around on this build so you can get a look at how it operates out in the battlefield. This sort of a build can be applied to any class, like I mentioned before, if you keep Carve in mind. Some classes will have alternatives for some of the skills. For example, a Dragon Knight could use Noxious Breath rather than Caltrops, and then have slots for DK specific skills, while maybe a Templar could potentially use Focused Charge rather than Stampede. If there's any interest, I could probably make the next several videos be this same solo setup applied to different classes, so let me know in the comments if you would like that to happen. And one other thing before I go, if you're looking for a group of like-minded one-bar homies in-game and you're on the PC NA server, you can look up our tiny guild, One Bar Bros, in the guild finder, or send me a message in-game for an invite at Dumpster. Alright, thanks for watching as always. See ya.